What's going on, everybody? This is the Blockchain Backer, bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. And today, we're taking a peek over here at the Bitcoin price chart, which is currently above $43,000. We'll talk, of course, about the altcoin market, which is what seems to be the big buzz over there on the internet. Everybody's asking when moon. I did a live stream yesterday. When moon, when moon, when moon. So we'll talk about those types of things here in this video. But obviously, big story, Bitcoin sitting up here at 43,600 as I'm recording at this moment. Things are moving pretty volatile and pretty fast. At one point, Bitcoin hit $45,000 within the last, let's take a look at that. In the last 3 hours, Bitcoin was at $45,000, back to 43.6 right now. But surprise, surprise, occurring right on schedule with the fractal, the bear market fractal that it's been following for almost 6 months at this point. So the big question everybody has on their mind right now is, hey, if Bitcoin's going to go back into this retracement, then those altcoins probably got to get moving pretty soon. And I would think the same thing. We've gone through the 2018 end of cycle retracement. We saw that the altcoins all ran in a 25 to 40 day period. You can do the math on this. There's only like 25 days left if it continues to follow this thing precisely. So what happens if it deviates? What happens if it starts to slow down at some point, right? But if we go based on exactly this and assume, hey, it's going to follow this, which I don't like this, by the way. I don't like that I have to sit here and say, everything is dependent on this thing playing out exactly like it's played before. I don't like putting my name on it and saying that this is what it has to do, because this is like the most basic TA that you can do. I mean, essentially saying it has to follow this because it's followed it before. It makes me really uncomfortable, but we can't ignore it that it has. So one of the most common questions I got yesterday in the live stream was when moon? When is the moon mission going to begin for the altcoin market? Which I don't have the answer for you. I can never answer a when question. The only thing we can do is look to the past and see how the market has played out historically. And in 2018, as Bitcoin got back to its retracement levels, the altcoin market was mooning, and the top of the altcoin market came in at that time. That's the best answer I can give to that question. So the question I think everybody wants to know is, when is it going to begin? There's no way for me to answer that question. I can only point to the time period where it ended. And again, like we were just saying, what if this thing starts to play out a little bit differently than this whole thing, right? I think in the back of my mind, I have to always say to myself, this thing could stop doing this at some point, and of course I've been saying that for months at this point, but it hasn't. It's still continued to follow it just precisely. But what happens when it finally breaks away, right? Everybody's going to panic. Everybody's going to freak out and say, hey, it's not following it. What now? Oh, no, it's all over. Kind of like 5 days ago, right? The sky was essentially falling 5 days ago. Look at the sentiment over there on Twitter. Everybody's euphoric all over again. And the only thing I can do is show how the market has played out in the past and give my best educated guess, right? I'm not some magic fortune teller. I just spend a lot of time in the charts and try to show you the things that have happened in this market historically. And one of those charts we've looked at a lot has been the inverse price chart of Bitcoin and comparing to what long-term reversals look like. So what happens if it breaks away from that whole structure, right? There's this complicated element, and somebody brought this up in the live stream, and it's a really good point that let's pretend that this moment in here was this, right? What if we're going to be heading down a little bit lower, and then we just kind of hang out, you pop up, and then you start doing this whole thing in here, right? This is still, it's an ABC that could play out for a very long time in here, which would look something like that, right? Not only that, but let's flip over to the chart we were looking at. Let's go like this, and then let's invert this one down in here to say, all right, well, what if it comes up a little bit short, right? So what happens if we do this, right? We come up and we get near 618 retracement level in here, and then suddenly it falls down on itself, right? And then we just kind of continue up in here, and then it breaks down, and then it ABCs its way. I mean, that's not out of the cards that can't happen in there. And while a lot of people would like for me to tell them what to do, I don't ever tell you what to do. I tell you how the market has played out before, and I try to point it out to you. But there's going to be a challenging moment that comes in right in there, because the thing we won't know is if we're going to start deviating away from the fractal and start doing an ABC, or if we're going to do this, and then that's the end, and Bitcoin plunges down into oblivion. Because when we go back to 2018 and what the top looked like in there, we did have an ABC that came in here, and that was the marking of the end of the retracement, and then it fell. But we've been following a fractal for this long. Will it continue to follow it out perfectly? And that's the thing. I can essentially guarantee, it's hard for me to ever put guarantees on anything, but I can guarantee it will break away from this thing at some point. At some point, it is not going to do it anymore. The thing we don't know is, when is that moment going to happen? And to see why it's going to be a complication and why it's going to be a challenge is we can even look back to the top of Bitcoin back in 2017 and 18 and see what happened, in that Bitcoin eventually retraced back to its 618 Fibonacci retracement, turned down, and then went up to its 702 retracement, which was an A, B, C. But focus on that, right? Where was the first stop it made? It went up to a 618 and then turned over, and then the altcoin surged into that moment. Well, you can see where this fractal that we're following takes us to. It takes us right back to a 618 retracement. And in 2017, that was the A leg. So you went A, B, C. And it ended up being this one, which is where the altcoins topped out at. And then when you look at the inverse price charts, which we've been studying, and let's revert these back to other scales so it's easier to comprehend in here, is that where did it head back to, right? It headed back to nearly getting to a 618 retracement in here, before then eventually moving back down in order to do an A, B, C. So if you kind of take that into consideration as well, you get an A, B, C. That's normal. That's what you usually get. You usually get some type of ABC correction coming in at the top or on a long-term reversal. That's the most common thing that you see. We saw that at the bottom of Bitcoin's bear market, and we saw that at the top of Bitcoin's bull market. Both times, ABC corrections in both directions, right? So this is inverse, right? So get off the inverted scale. Even when Bitcoin came in and did its bottom down in here in 2018, 19, it did the same thing that it did at the top for the long-term reversal, which you can see when we zoom in on it and get it a little bit clearer to understand how that reversal ended up playing out, which is why we keep talking about the inverse chart, right? That's your normal TA. That's your standard TA. That's your Elliott waves. That's how things usually play out. But the challenge here is that Bitcoin is ridiculously following a bear market fractal that it did back in 2018, and it's been doing it for almost 6 months. And so that's the reality of the situation, is how do you risk manage it, right? And that's for everybody to decide for themselves. But I show you kind of what goes through my mind, right? I have no way to be able to say which one is more likely. I just have no way. So I have to say to myself, knowing that I have no way to know which one it's going to do. I can make my best educated guess, but I don't have a way to decipher that information that's being presented right there to say which one is more statistically likely to occur. I don't have a way, because I have to say to myself, if this is going to continue playing out like this, and we are going to continue following this fractal for, let's say, another year or two, well, what happens after this moment? And the answer is that. $10,000 for Bitcoin, taking back the entire 2020 and 2021 bull run and closing the gap. You can see that when we zoom in a little bit closer to see how it's all playing out, right? If the fractal continued, that's what would happen, right? Now, I deem it very likely that that's what's eventually going to happen for Bitcoin, is that we are going to take back the whole 2020 and 2021 bull run, closing out that entire gap that was never backtested at any point, grinding its way up, and not even grinding, just breaking out straight up, that it will take that whole thing back at some point. But the big question is, does it continue following the fractal, and does it only have one shot at it? Or does it break free from the fractal and do what typically happens at reversals for Bitcoin, where we have ABC corrections before the bigger plunge takes place? And the big challenge of that is that we can even see in here is that it gets back to a 618 retracement in here before it heads back down lower, just like our fractal takes us to the 618 retracement. But with that fractal that it's followed for almost 6 months, it heads back to the lows, sideways, plunges. But in most circumstances of reversals for Bitcoin, we see it come back down and then work its way back up for a C leg like we had at the bottom of the 2018 and 19 bear market, and like we had at the top of the 2017 and 18 bull market, in that the first leg stopped at the 618 retracement right in here for an A, B, C. Problem is that fractal, what does it do? That fractal, it takes us up in here and gets us back to the 618, brings us all the way back down here, and then eventually plunges in here. But in most reversals, we see ABCs. And so the question is, how can you reasonably conclude which one will occur? We can look to the last two major reversals that happened at both the top and the bottom. Both of them had ABC corrections, but we know Bitcoin's followed this fractal for almost 6 months. Depending on either one of them to occur seems incredibly risky to say, hey, it has to keep following this fractal because it's been following it, and saying it's not going to do standard Elliott wave ABC corrections before it plunges. Or the other option is you have to say to yourself, yes, it's following it. Yes, it's going to head to the 618. Yes, it's going to continue following it down here. But at that exact moment is when it's actually going to break away from it, and it's going to go head into an A, B, C. How can anybody reasonably conclude one way or the other? It is seeming like you have to either put all of your eggs in the basket that it's going to keep following this fractal because it has followed it for 6 months, or you have to put your eggs in the basket of saying it's going to break away from it, even though it's followed it for almost 6 months. Now, if within the next couple of days or so, we start seeing altcoins exploding to the upside, well, to me, that's going to tell me it's pretty likely this is probably going to be it. That's what I would think if we started seeing all-time high breakouts and all that stuff happen. But why are we talking about this right now? And it's because, well, today's March 1st. This thing, if it keeps following it and going at the same rate that it is, March 24th is where it starts heading down to the downside. That means there's 24 days for everything to be able to play out. Now, is that enough time? Yes, it still is enough time, but things are going to have to break out pretty soon in order for that to happen. And in a normal circumstance, my bias would be we're just going to do an ABC correction. That's what my bias would be. I'd say, look, at all reversals, that's what we tend to see. We tend to see that we have a big fall. We have an ABC correction come out in here, and that's what we're going to be looking for, and that's going to be the exciting time of the market. The complication here is that this thing has been following the whole time. It's really annoying. It's been nice to have like a blueprint to be able to follow and all that stuff, but it throws this complication. This is where things are going to get very complicated, and where no matter what, I'm going to have to risk manage in here. If altcoins are booming, if altcoins are not booming, I'm going to have to risk manage in here. My personal bias is that the Bitcoin bull run is over. I know it's common for retracements to happen before the next leg down happens. I also know it's very common to have ABC corrections happen. And even in 2017, we went to A, B, C, and the altcoins were all exploding and topped into this moment. But this fractal has created extreme complications on risk management for the fact that it has followed it for nearly 6 months. And throws in the big question for me on, are we going to ABC? Is it going to continue following this, which comes down here and then plunges down to 10,000? And this will be a lot easier to answer if the altcoins just start taking off right now. 24-day, 25-day, super mega alt season, it goes crazy. Hey, we've seen that before. All good. But what if it doesn't? What if we get back up in here? Then it becomes all the big questions. It becomes the question of, hey, is this going to be the first time in history that we've seen a major topping come in for Bitcoin and that there wasn't any type of alt season that ended up happening? Does that mean this time is different? Or does it mean it's doing exactly like it did back in 2018, where the A leg came back to a 618, we went into a B leg, and then went into a C leg, and the altcoin stopped over here? That's going to be the very big challenge coming here if Bitcoin gets back up to that 618 retracement at like $55,000 and these altcoins aren't exploding out into new all-time highs. Now, I can already read the comments right now before I've even exported this video or uploaded it that a lot of people are probably going to panic on hearing something like that, right? But the reality is, we've got to talk about it right now. If this thing is done in 24 days and the altcoins haven't taken off into that, that's the situation that's going to be posed right there. You have to say to yourself, this time is different. There's going to be no altcoin explosion. It's going to be the first time in history that Bitcoin has gone in for a top and that the altcoins didn't take off into the moment. It will have never happened before. It will be the first time that it's ever happened. You'd have to say Bitcoin's going to plunge. It's going to go down really, really far. Altcoins are going to plunge even more and more and more, even the ones that haven't taken off. Or you have to say to yourself, it's going to break. It's going to still pull down, right? It's typical for ABC. It's going to pull down, but once it gets down in here, it's going to break away from it. And then things are going to change from the fractal, and it's not going to do the fractal anymore, and it's going to pull up for a C leg. And that was where the top happened for the altcoin market back in 2018. And I want to show you that with the information we have in front of us right now, I cannot draw a conclusion one way or the other. And so the only thing I can think of to do if that circumstance happened would be that I'd have to take some off the table here at this moment, because I wouldn't be able to risk at all that it is going to do a B leg and C leg. My intuition would tell me that it would. My intuition would tell me if the altcoins haven't taken off into this moment, that we're going to do what we typically do, is that we are going to do a B leg and a C leg, and that the altcoins will go into this moment. That's going to be my intuition on what's the most likely thing that is going to happen. However, that also means I have to gamble that this fractal is going to break at this moment down in here. And the question I have to answer to myself is, am I willing to risk everything on that happening? That it's finally going to break away down here. And as somebody who spent all this time in here accumulating cryptocurrencies in 2018, 19, and 20, preparing for this big, massive bull run, the answer is no. I can't risk it all. It's not part of my exit plan. My exit plan has always been that if Bitcoin gets back into the retracement levels, that I have to pull some off the table. And so no matter what happens with the market, if Bitcoin gets back up into these price levels, I have to pull some off. Now, this whole thing could flip on a dime. These altcoins could take off later today, and it all begins today. It's how it happened in 2018. Things just started taking off, boom, gone. And then, 3-4 weeks later, boom, it was all over. That's still always possible. There's enough time for that to happen. But I always talk about how I'm trying to stay 2 steps ahead. And this is one of those things that I have to say to myself, what happens if that occurs? What am I going to do about it? Hopefully, that situation isn't what arises. And hopefully everything just takes off into that moment and we get what we see at the end of every bull run that has happened for Bitcoin. Big, massive surge there with the altcoins into the ending. But what we know is that in 2018, when the top came in, there was an ABC that happened, and the A leg came back to the 618, followed by a move down and then a move back up for the C leg. But we also know we're following this fractal ridiculously well. And this fractal, if it continued, it does not show that happening. It's very difficult for me as somebody who spends so much time studying these markets, so much time in here, to sit here and see everything being dictated by this fractal. It's very annoying. It's very frustrating. And to think that I would ever have to sit here and be like, I'm depending on this thing, I'm like actually doing something based off what this is saying, is kind of crazy to me. But it's very difficult to say I have any choice. If it gets back to the retracement levels, my exit plan has always been that I have to pull some off the table at the retracement levels no matter what. My exit plan has always been I have targets picked out. If the targets come up short into the retracement, that's where I've got to start doing some cutting. There's still time for things to happen. 24 days left if it continues following this thing. 24 days is enough time. But as this clock is ticking on this fractal, it becomes a point of having to figure out what am I going to do in the different circumstances that are being presented. And the last thing I would ever want to do is come on this YouTube channel and be like, surprise, I'm selling. No, it's always, I've talked about it for years at this point, that this would be my strategy, is that I have targets picked out. And then as we get into the retracement, it's where I'd have to start cutting stuff. And I'm not going to sell everything, right? I just got to take some risk off the table. I have to reap some rewards from this bull run. It's nearly impossible for me to capitulate on the idea that the altcoins are not going to surge into the ending of Bitcoin. It's what we've seen every time. It's going to be nearly impossible for me to capitulate on that idea. But I do have to stick to my exit plan, and I have to follow my rules. I created an exit plan so that I wouldn't have to do any real thinking. It's just conditions. we hit a top, we go into a retracement. That's where you got to do it. So if we get back there and nothing's happened, I still got to do it. I'm still going to be a believer that this fractal is going to eventually break and we'll go in for a C leg for the altcoin market to take off. But there's no way I can risk everything on it doing it. Now, does the altcoin market look good? For sure, it looks great. It's still all the exact same stuff we've talked about. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A, B, C, all that looks good. You look over here at XRP, classic crash, retrace, reaccumulation, looks good. You even look at the last bull run for XRP. It paused in this time period right in here before breaking out and going up another big leg. All of that looks good to me. This thing looks ready to explode to me. This is what happens. You have your crash, your retrace back to retracement levels, reaccumulation, and then break out and go. All of it looks good. I'm all super optimistic on this. But as we start heading into this moment, that's what this whole thing is all about, right? And I know that out there on the internet and all over places, all over everywhere, it's going to be all about moon missions, craziness, fun times, glory. We're going to the moon, and we very well could be. I think it's very possible that's what's going to be happening in here, and that it's going to be incredibly exciting and euphoric. But you see what happens with things like Doge. You see what happens with things like SHIB, right? Everybody's piling in. Everybody's chasing everything. Everything's going crazy. And that's not what any of this is going to be about for me. All of this, everything going on during this whole time period that we're going to be going through here soon is about exiting for me. It's about me being the one selling my bags, not me buying bags, day trading, trying to catch 20% here and there. It's none of that. This is all my bigger plan, my multi-year plan, all culminating at this exact moment right in here. And so while it may be fun, while it may be exciting to see big green lines that'll show up in the market, so long as we get what we've seen before, it's not a time where I'm hooting and hollering and screaming on Twitter and high-fiving everybody. It's me being very strategic in here and exiting my positions into those moments. And I take this all very seriously because we know how fast these things can happen. And I was showing this over there in the live stream yesterday for XRP. If we take this fractal of how the ending came in last time, and if we did something equivalent to that right in here, right? You got something kind of similar going on in here, right? Today, it's like today would be the day, right? You could see last time in just a matter of 3 days being up 267%. Could you imagine if in 3 days from right now, and I'm not saying it is, but imagine it, what is today? Tuesday. Imagine Friday, suddenly XRP is $2.90, $2.80. What would be happening out there on Twitter? What would be happening with YouTube videos? What would the excitement be like and the chaos be like? And people wrapped up in FOMO and excitement and euphoria into a moment like that occurring. It would be crazy. It would be very exciting. But you'd have me sitting back over here saying, okay, great, good, finally. All right, we're getting it. We're starting to move our way up. What am I looking for? I'm looking for a few additional waves, and I'm getting ready to let go. While everybody else is piling in and getting excited and having FOMO and euphoria. But I'm over here playing the other side. And what few people would understand from a mathematic percentage is at that point, if you had a 3-day rise like that happen over there for XRP, the bulk of the bull run is already over. The vast majority of the bull run would be done. You could see it from a percentage standpoint, which is why I always say mathematics and percentages are the most important to me, is that if you got to that moment right in there, 2,357% of a rise would have already happened in XRP. If you're going for, say, $10 at that point, you know, what are you chasing? You're chasing 253%. 253% is nothing to scoff at, but the majority of the run's already over, and it would create extreme excitement, people piling in. There's some type of narrative. Maybe a settlement has happened. Maybe something has happened with, regulations or something. Who knows what a narrative would be? But, that's the kind of stuff I was dealing with Bitcoin being at the top. Sounding like I was a broken record at the time, but that all it would take would be this 3-day rise like we saw back in 2017 to trigger mass hysteria. And like we talked about before, it doesn't take a whole lot of time for these types of things to play out. And even last time, it took a matter, I've consistently been saying 23 days from this time period right in here, right? How much time do we have? 24. So please break out. But, the point I'm getting at in here is that we're getting to a complicated time. We're getting to where things need to start moving over there for the altcoin market. I'm sorry, guys. I don't have the answer for you for when it will start. I can only tell you and show you points in time of where they've happened before, where they've ended. In 2018, they ended back at the retracement levels, and Bitcoin did an ABC correction at that time. So A back to 618, B, and C. You can clearly see we've been following this fractal for nearly 6 months at this point. Will it break away from it? That's going to be the big question moving forward. But I think the thing that we could all celebrate is if these altcoins could break out relatively soon. If we saw altcoins break out, if we saw XRP pull some big 250% 3-day candle or something like that, I would be sitting here saying, yeah, that's it. That's going to be the end of it for sure. But until that moment comes, until those altcoins do start breaking out and going, that's the kind of the thing we're just kind of waiting for another clearer picture. Because right now we could see this, we could see it's following this, just fine. But for the next phase and the next step, we need to see more action and more confluence throughout the rest of the market. And we're still waiting on that right now. And so to answer the question of when to moon, which is obviously the most popular question in the world, I don't have the answer. But if Bitcoin is going to continue following its fractal that it's been following for nearly 6 months, and if the altcoin bull run is going to happen into that, and if it's going to maintain that fractal, you would sure think within the next few days that these things would get moving pretty quickly. If not, then we need to start having more serious discussions about the things that we were talking about in this video. But as you can see, even for XRP, while at like the last second of time in here, you can see even a repeat of this does give you enough time. But obviously, if it was going to move at that velocity, it would need to get moving pretty soon. So things for the coming days if Bitcoin is going to continue following this, right? So we know that when it came in here, you could see it came back up to this area right in here. That's where we are right in here right now, right? You could see that it paused there for a couple of days. And that's kind of what we're witnessing right now. So we'll see if this thing continues, like we always say. And if it does continue, it looks like in the next, day or two, you would see some type of bigger move once again, maybe getting Bitcoin up to closer to that $50,000 price point. But time will tell. And on that note, we'll go ahead and wrap this thing up. It's an exciting time in crypto for sure. Bitcoin's following along with that fractal, but we're all on pins and needles right now to see what's going to happen with that altcoin market. And I know the question yesterday constantly was when moon. So hopefully I can kind of answer that in this video, at least from my perspective. I have no way to answer when moon, but I can at least tell you all the things I'm looking at. So I hope that helped give at least a little bit of my insight. And so my perspective, of course, is that Bitcoin's in a bear market. So that's just my perspective, right? A lot of people out there have the perspective that Bitcoin's going to break off and go into, new all-time highs, $100,000, $200,000 Bitcoin. I don't, entertain that idea. I play along with the idea of that Bitcoin's in a bear market, and I structure what I'm doing based around that. So from my perspective, those are the things that I'm looking for. So I hope that provided some insight into my thoughts. But all right, guys, that's going to be it. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're looking for something to do, of course, you could check out my website over here, which is bcbacker.com. This is a course I put together where I deep dive into the previous Bitcoin bull runs, the previous altcoin market cycles, tying them all together to show how the cryptocurrency market has worked in the past. I talk about my exit plans in here, and I teach you how to set up your own charts and your own indicators within TradingView and CoinTrader Pro so you can do your own charting. I did just recently include a new market update in here yesterday, February 28th, and that's available to anybody enrolled in the course and anybody who newly enrolls. And you could check out all of this educational content over here on bcbacker.com. You could follow me over here on Twitter at bcbacker. And I want to thank you so much for watching my channel. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you could be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice, and I am not a financial advisor. But if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.